So task 3 involves using try-catch blocks, and try-catch is used in almost every programming language because it allows you to handle errors that you cannot predict ahead of time. And if you handle those errors, your script or program can keep running. I'm sure you guys have all seen when you've executed your SQL code, if there's an error, it stops and nothing else runs. And what happens is that it automatically backs out of all transactions. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple different insert statements. We're going to be inserting invoices, and we're going to put each one in its own little try-catch block so that if one of those insert statements fail, the other one will still work. Okay, so it won't be like an all or nothing deal. So I'm going to pause here while I get all of this entered, and then we'll walk through what it's doing and run it. All right, so here is our code for entering two different invoices. We're going to be using our AP database and the invoices table. So you can see that we have invoice information, and here's our try block. So all we do is take the insert statement and stick it inside begin try and end try. Now, right below a try block, you have to have the catch block, and that prints the message when there's an error. It automatically looks for the catch right below the try. And so our catch block is just indicating that the record was not inserted and that there was an error. And we are printing out the SQL error number and the SQL error message. Okay, and we're doing the same thing for the second invoice that we're trying to insert. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And this was set up so that there would be an error. So you can see the first invoice was not inserted. Okay, and it's telling you that 0 rows affected. That would be your first indicator, but then our failure message is displaying. It's giving us the error. It's giving us the error number, and what is actually more helpful is the error message, because we can see we have a foreign key error. So whatever we have entered for the foreign key, and it looks like it's a vendor. The vendor ID is not in the vendor table. Now for our second invoice, everything went through fine. Okay, it's the first one that did not work. Normally in this situation, once it hits an error, it stops, and that we would not have been able to enter that second one. Okay, so that is try catch. And we are going to go ahead and move our closing comment down. And we are going to do another one. So due to a computer glitch, the invoice totals are not reflecting a 6% sales tax. So we basically have to update all the invoice totals by adding 6% to them. And because we are messing around with the invoice totals, our boss actually wants us to do this in a temporary table first, so they can review the results and make sure that it's processing correctly. Okay, so what we're going to do is remove the old temporary table if it exists, and we'll use some try-catch processing with that, and then we will create our new temporary table. So I'm going to pause this and get all of the code entered, and then we'll walk through what it's doing. Okay, so we are dealing with our AP database. Our first task is going to be to get rid of the invoice copy table if it exists. And so there's multiple ways to do this. Before, what we did was we checked the object ID to see if it was there. This time, what we're doing is we are putting it in a try-catch block. So basically in our try block, we are dropping the table. Okay, and so if that table does not exist, then that's going to flag an error. So it's going to go down into catch, and it's just going to print out that the table doesn't exist. And then it will continue processing. So then it'll come down here, and we're doing a select into, and here we are creating invoice copy. And then we need to process each row individually. And so we're declaring the, I'm calling it an invoice cursor. And it is a cursor for selecting everything from invoice copy. Okay, we want all of the rows. So then we got to open that invoice cursor and retrieve the very first row. And we're going to stay in this while loop as long as there are rows to retrieve. Okay, and so once we get into the loop, what it's going to do is it's going to update the invoice total by adding the 6% sales tax into the total. Then it's going to print out that the total has been updated and retrieve the next row. And it's going to stay in this loop until it processes the very last row. Then it'll fall out of the loop where it will close that invoice cursor, and then it deallocates the resources that the cursor was using. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And because we are manipulating the temporary table, the real invoice data is not being changed. Okay, and what we would do with this output is basically show our boss, and they would be checking that invoice total to be making sure that it was correct now that we have added that 6% in. And we're going to take our closing comment and move that down.